Good morning, YouTube. It's your man, All the Rage George Page, coming to you live on YouTube. It's been a while since I talked anything political and just dropped some knowledge. I got, I'm working on so much stuff right now, and then I got a lot of free time, especially since I don't have my mom anymore. But I was watching on YouTube Jesse Dollemore. If you don't know who Jesse Dollemore is, he's a former Republican, former United States Marine. He's a political activist. He often comes on and he reports stuff that's going on in politics and the news. And he was reported a story that was done the other day with Dumbass in Chief, as you know who I'm talking about. And he had one of his pressers where it's like, because it's hard difficult, you can't travel too much with the coronavirus going on, and these rallies he have. And a reporter brought up a subject called Project 1619. Well, just the first time I ever heard of it. And what I know about the project was that it is um, basically uh, a curriculum for schools which teaches the history of slavery. That the date slavery first started, when the first Africans came to America, was August 1619 in Virginia. And I find this plaque here where it commemorates when the first Africans came to Virginia. Now, I can tell you this about my family. My great grandfather was born in slavery. And unlike some of the people, well, some people are like, oh, I'm five, six generations away from slavery. I'm just barely two. If you count myself, between my grandfather and my father, I'm just two generations away from slavery. You know, two or three if you want to pick numbers, but my great grandfather was born as a slave. My grandfather, his son, then my father, his son, and me. That's just barely two generations. Or some of you people like, oh, I'm five, six, seven generations. But I lived down south most of my life. My great grandfather was a slave. My grandfather was a sharecropper. My father was a sharecropper, and I did some when I was younger. But the thing is, when Dumbass in Chief was saying that he didn't want that curriculum to teach, he didn't want the history to be changed. But the problem was, history was never really told. It's not the full statement of history. You have to remember, slaves built this country, built most of the world. We were used as cannon fodder. Then a war happened, and things are supposed to change. Things would have been better, but it didn't. It was still a struggle. You got to think about it. They created laws where if you were out after midnight, you go to jail. Sundowning laws. Black people couldn't vote. They couldn't own property. Stories of when like soldiers come home from war couldn't even get a GI Bill, meaning they couldn't give themselves an education and to buy property, to have a say of how this country should be run. Right now, we're trying to fight for reparations. And that's something that with the his opponent Joe Biden need to work on. He need even though you picked a black woman to be your running mate, but yeah, she but still we got to pick. Even though some people may not like the man we choose, basically, like I said, my favorite quote from Batman: "He's not the hero that we want, but he's the hero that we needed at the time." Now, the 1619 project is a good idea. Every school should have it, but there's going to be schools going to be pushed back against it. I think mostly schools that has a high majority of white people, especially schools in suburbs, schools in the South, and schools who are not as like maybe places like Arizona, Indiana, Utah, maybe Montana, several states that very don't have a lot of black people in them. But the fact is, history has to be told. You can't always be a little section where how the Revolutionary War started. We got to remember, the Revolutionary War started when British soldiers shot a black man who wasn't even involved in the riots. He was walking down the street minding his own business. Crispus Attucks, check him out, Crispus Attucks. He was a former slave and a blacksmith. And he was living up around, I think, in New England, I think around Boston, whichever way the first shot was fired. He was minding his own business because they saw a black man. Before, you know, Dwayne Maduran Dollar got shot about 40 times. Before, Stephen Clark. Before, you know, Martin Luther King even. The first black man to get shot by so-called, symbols of law enforcement was Crispus Attucks. He was minding his own business. He was involved in the revolution. He was involved in the riot. He was involved in the protest. But he got shot. But he was the reason why the whole, Revolutionary War really started. So black people for so many years have been the reason why this country is what it is now. And a lot of people want to forget that. And this 1619 project, I'm going to post the Jesse Dollar we talked about it. I'm also going to post that it's a New York Times story. I'm going to post that also on the in my description because I checked it out and I read it, and it's very it tells a lot. New York Times is not the best best magazine for or newspaper for about the black people, but still they're doing their part, showing the truth of why our people, my ancestors, stories need to be told. How the system is rigged against us. How they trot out fools like Candace Owens, Herschel Walker, Tim Scott. Funny thing was Candace Owens wasn't even at the RNC convention. And that's sad. You often are the one that they like to put out as a show pony, just to say, hey, black people, you need to pull your strap by his bootstraps. It's funny how quite often, white people say about, let's remember history, but then they want to forget certain parts of history. Like I said, that the orange man, I'm just gonna call him, how he said he didn't want his history changed. The fact was, it's not your history, not just your history. It's this whole country's history. And you remember years ago, back in '96, when Bob Dole was running for president. Let me say that part. He said, we're going back to the 50s. You know why 50s were? 50s was the last time where white men felt like they were important. Where they said, minorities knew their place and women stay in the kitchen. Everything changes after the 50s. The country had to change. Every country has to change. You can't stay the same. And that's the problem with older people, especially certain people like this man who is sitting in the White House. They stuck on the past. Because, and you know what, slavery, like I said, racism doesn't end just because the old people die. They teach that stuff to the next generation and they carry it on. That's why you need to cut it at the knees. Stop it. Let truth known. See, when it doesn't matter, when it's not about your family, about your race, or about your culture, it doesn't matter. But then when it's about somebody else's, there's a problem. Right now, it was talking about the situation with Jacob Blake. People talk about protesting. But if you remember, this country was developed by protesting. Didn't the original first Americans, the founding fathers, whatever they call themselves, protesters against the British? And I said it before, it's funny that Britain was one of the countries that ended slavery. They stopped doing slavery. But America kept on going. And one thing the Republicans like to ride on, yes, many blacks were Republicans originally, because definitely some Democrats were not our fans, but many blacks were Republicans. Even the great late Dr. Martin Luther King was a Republican. But the fact was, reason why we turned it back on the Republican Party, because they did shit. They always want to ride on the fact that it was Lincoln who helped free the slaves. But the fact was, when he was killed, many Republicans didn't do nothing after that. They didn't stop, the southern states and counties from creating certain laws against black people. They didn't own up to the 40 acres and a mule promise. And the reason why blacks went back to Democrats, because the fact was, Democrats saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of somebody else's mess. I'm more in my mindset, I'm more of an independent. And the problem with independence is they don't got enough power, enough force, because the fact is, there's too many French nuts in it. As truthfully is. And often, there are some good ideas, but we don't have enough strength to push the ideas. Like I say, people can look at like good examples of that as like guys like Jesse Bobby Ventura, but Jesse Bobby Ventura, he has some good points. He does. But the fact is, this project 1619 needs to be put into schools. Because right now, schools are still teaching half-ass history. They teach you that, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, Civil War, that's it. And every now and then you might get sprinkled in Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and maybe, Thurgood Marshall, and Martin Luther King, and Dr. X. But not the whole history. Not W.D. Du Bois. Not, Colvin, the lady I did a video about a while back, who was actually the first black woman, actually the first black person who started the bus boycott. Not Rosa Parks. Even though we love Rosa Parks, she was just used as a tool, because the fact was, the other lady was a 15-year-old girl who got pregnant. Even black people, we even, do subterfuge to get what we want. It's not just a white thing. But I'm like this. This 1619 project needs to be pushed. Even now with the whole COVID virus thing, parents, a lot of you are going to be teaching your kids at home. All you got to do is do it yourself. Let them learn the regular, strictly everyday stuff, and then you put in the work for the rest. You got to think about it. You are the people that your children look up to. You are their guardians and the educators. Don't depend on somebody else to teach them something. I know a lot of parents, people especially where I know, haven't even finished school. But sometimes, if you do this, it's educate yourself also. This thing is not about racism, not about black and white so much. It's about the haves and the have-nots. And many of the haves are racist. This is your man, George Page. Like, subscribe. Don't subscribe. I'm out.